Hi, you're listening to the Content Sells Podcast, a show all about how to create content to attract, convert, and keep your ideal clients. Welcome to episode 227. I'm Suzi Dafnis, and here with me is my co-host, the lovely Michelle Falzon. Hey, Michelle, how are you?
Hey, Suzi, I am great. I am a tiny little bit manic. I'm in the middle of a hugely busy period. I've got some major client work going on, some deadlines, but I'm loving it, and I'm loving being part of some awesome projects with awesome people, kicking some big goals. So that's always a good feeling.
Yeah, here's to lots of great projects in the year ahead for both of us and the work that we do collectively. Last year was a big year of travel for me, and I know that I needed to be really efficient to fit in all the things in the spaces that we had available, especially for the work we do together, Michelle. And one thing that can happen when we're busy is it's hard to distinguish between just busyness when we're in the weeds but not getting closer to our goals quickly enough, and the activity that's actually moving the needle, that's actually moving us forward. And another thing we've noticed is that sometimes when we have big goals, we just can't get there by grinding our way there, by making little incremental steps, because the goals are so big that it would just take a million years. And we've all heard that saying that what got you here won't get you there. And so when there is a big, brand new, beautiful place, sometimes working harder isn't going to cut it. And we know that definition of insanity, right? Doing what you've always done and expecting something different. So while we are big here on the show about rinsing and repeating, digging into our grit, project broken record, you've heard us say that, and taking consistent action over time to get results, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it doesn't work. There's also another way of being that's needed from time to time that's necessary for your growth through your marketing. And that thing that is necessary is making some big leaps forward, changing things up in major ways. And this is something that strategic coach founder Dan Sullivan calls 10xing or 10 timesing. And the idea is that instead of just making an incremental step forward, you do something that gives you a big leap, that moves you 10 times further in a short period of time. Now, what does this look like? This can look like you launching a high ticket offer. So maybe you've only ever sold something for $500 and now you introduce something that's $5,000. Or you expand your operation from just working in Australia to opening up in the US. And this is something two of our amazing masterminders, Brooke and Jody, have done. They've got a business called Soccer Ball, and they help provide fundraising solutions for clubs and associations. And to the name, they do that through creating these really fun socks that people can use to fundraise. So whatever the big leap is for you, whether that is a new market, a new product or service, a new price point, a new business model, it can take a paradigm shift, some what we call 10x thinking in how you see your value or what's possible, your ability to deal with the new challenges that might arise. And it might actually require a whole new way to market and promote your products and services. It might mean that you need to learn an entirely new skill or get rid of some old things that you used to do to give space to these 10x activities. Or it might mean you need to seek out an ideal client. Now, in his most recent book, which Dan Sullivan has written with Dr. Benjamin Hardy. The book is called 10x is easier than 2x. He says 10x is the means and freedom is the end. Every time you go 10x, you consciously choose to live your life at a particular level or standard. No matter how abnormal or seemingly impossible, you choose the standard. You commit to it. You live as you choose, transforming yourself and your world through your commitment. It's very exciting.
Yeah, it's a really powerful idea, this idea of 10x. And, the premise of the book that Dan and Benjamin have written is 10x is easier than 2x. And this is an intriguing idea. And Suzi and I have done a lot of talking about this, a lot of thinking about this. We've recently done a deep dive into this idea of 10x thinking and really exploring, is 10x thinking easier than 2x thinking? And what does this really mean? We did a deep dive at this at our recent in-person mastermind event. It was so powerful. There were so many breakthroughs and insights that we're seeing kind of the ripple effects of, weeks later. We wanted to share a bit of what we covered with you. And we're really exploring and playing with the idea that 10x is easier than 2x. Is it? Is it? Do we always want to be 10xing? Do we always want to be 2xing? How do those ideas interplay? And that's really what we're going to be exploring in this episode. Now, obviously, we can't cover everything we shared with our masterminders. We've got an hour or less together with you right now on this show, and we spent 2 full days with our masterminders. And before that, Suzi and I spent 2 to 3 full months kind of philosophizing and talking and thrashing this out together, and then separately kind of doing our own thinking as well. But what we're going to bring to you now is sort of the distillation of some thoughts that we think are helpful for you as a business owner, as a marketer, as a content marketer, as somebody who's maybe an expert in putting yourself out there in the world, as someone who's probably juggling 50,000 million things. What do you actually focus on? And really that interplay between 10x and 2x. So there are some key ideas that we think are important that we're going to cover here today. And the first big idea that really landed for our masterminders was that while books like 10x is easier than 2x really are awesome, I loved this book and I'm still reading it and still getting insight from it. And we're all for making those 10x leaps. In fact, we've dedicated most of this episode to helping you find some areas in your business to 10x, and in particular in your marketing. What we find is that a lot of the communication, and it does tend to be male communication, is just 10x, 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 right? They tend to downplay the importance, or they just sort of sidestep the relationship of 10x to 2x. And as Suzi said, we've been really big on this show about those kinds of 2x improvements. You know, run your webinar, tweak it, improve it, run it again. This is how people like Fiona of Style Liberation have really grown very strong, grounded, successful, profitable businesses that are growing. And we've got a whole episode that Suzi referred to, Project Broken Record, and we'll include a link to today's show notes to that show, which is all about this idea of incremental improvement and the power of making small steps in the right direction over time. That's that rinse and repeat, the power of compound interest, the plod, digging into your grit, all those things that you've heard us say over and over, and these are incredibly important and incredibly valid. So what are we actually saying here? How do these 2 ideas merge together? And I think, this is my personal view, and having worked for years with women in business, I think women tend to err more towards 2x, you know, and we've seen it in our own masterminders, and Suzi and her business community. Some women really reacted when that book came out, and you did. I mean, you did a solid to her business community, sharing that book with everybody. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. So 3 times a year, we send a club book to our members, and I always choose something that I think is going to help them grow their business. And when this went out, you know, the term 10x has been used in such a blokey way, in such a macho way, that it's like some women went, oh, I don't know if this book is for me.
Right.
But it's turned out to be one of their favorite books once they got into the ideas that we're talking about here today. And noticing that where they've just been in that 2x, rinse, repeat, move slowly, don't take risks, don't up level too fast, and really seeing where there's time for that, but also recognizing that sometimes in order to grow, you need to get into a 10x mindset.
Yeah, this is the sweet spot, I think, for us as business owners, and, you know, male or female, but I think particularly for women, we wanted to find a way to help you be brave, make those big leaps, and not get stuck playing small, while also not burning out or taking too many risks too often, or growing so fast that you break things, because you actually need both 10x and 2x thinking in your marketing, in your business. That's really what we have come to. There's the interplay. They're both important. You need them both. And, you know, one of the most powerful forces in nature is small changes over time. Like the whole evolution of the species has been small changes over time. And think about Niagara Falls. That water is always flowing over those falls, and it's eroding. It literally has moved mountains. It erodes at the rate of 1 meter per year. Now, 1 meter per year might not sound a lot, but look at that over time. Over the past 12,000 years, just a little over, it has eroded 11.4 kilometers of mountain. Talk about grit and consistency. And that is 2x, that constant incremental behavior that really moves mountains over time, the waterfall approach. Let's call it that. Whereas 10x, It ain't no waterfall. It's more like the volcano approach. Something erupts and very quickly changes the landscape in a massive way and often in a permanent way. It often involves something being destroyed. Like think about a volcano. Things get broken and burnt. It can be often like really disruptive, but they get destroyed in order to create something else, something new. And our thesis, our point we're putting across in today's show is you need both waterfalls and volcanoes.
Which is to say, you need both 10x and 2x in your business, because while incremental, that rinse and repeat growth can literally move mountains, as Michelle just explained. But it's not the only way to grow. Sometimes there are sharp increases. So if you imagine a line going upward, a vertical line, but it's not straight. There are periods where it goes straight up. You've just seen a big 10x move, and then it continues to go up, but now it's on a gradient. It's on an angle. And so over time, it's still trending upwards, but not on this vertical trend. Then there's another point in time when there's another sharp vertical rise. Now I'm moving my hands. I know you can't see that, but we're going to explain this. We're going to, imagine it. And we'll explain it a little further as we go along. It'll make a whole lot more sense.
Yeah, and what I'm imagining in my mind is like sort of almost like a odd angled staircase, big ups and then a little bit of a cross and then another big up. And, I 100% relate to what you're saying. And this is an idea I feel I can really get behind because I've, this 10X idea, Dan and Benjamin have really taken it and done something really interesting with their 10X is easier than 2X idea. But we've all heard the 10X idea before in different sort of frames. And I agree with you, Suzi. It's been very blokey and sort of aggressive and move fast to break things, and that's all there really is. But this idea, this interplay between 10X and 2X, between volcanoes and waterfalls, is one I can really get behind. You don't have to 10X on top of 10X on top of 10X with your marketing. It's not sustainable. But on the flip side, we've done a lot of focusing on the waterfalls on this show, on the focusing on the incremental power of progress via consistent action over time, 2X kind of approaches. And if you listen back to our shows, you'll hear a lot of that philosophy. And we 100% stand by that. Also, though, we wanted to take some time to talk to you and to shift our focus to the volcanoes, to the 10X. Where are the seismic shifts just waiting to happen in your business, in your marketing, in your messaging, in your reach? And a little later in the show, we're going to dig into 3 ways that you can possibly find those places that are ready for seismic shifts, places where you might be ready to 10X right now.
And that's coming up a little later in the show, but we want to give you a little more context at this end of the program. So because this 10X, this 10 times, it's an orientation. It's a way of thinking. So it doesn't mean that you have to literally 10X everything. It doesn't mean you have to go from $200,000 in income to 2 million, but it can mean that. It could be that for you, 10Xing is about having 10 times more free time, or 10Xing your email list, or your enjoyment, or how fast you can bring a new product to market, or deliver a product that you've sold, or 10Xing your sense of what's possible in your market, or you're thinking around something that perhaps you've been playing small in. And so I want you to think about it beyond the literal 10X, but just this meaning of this uplift, this big uplift. And something that Dan and Benjamin say in the book is that 10X is not about a specific outcome, it's about the process. So it's not about the $1 million or the 100 orders coming in or the 500 members. It's the process to go from where you are now to a new, much higher level. And you can do this because you've done it before. And we did an exercise at our 2-day mastermind program, which really demonstrated this. And I'm going to try and give you the picture of that here. There's a wonderful quote from Steve Jobs that says, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards." And that's just the start of the quote. But if you do look back, you'll be able to see times where you have 10X before. So if you think of a time where you've had a big leap in the past, when things dramatically shifted, it takes being willing to see that you've made gains before in order to recognize your 10x jumps that you've made in the past. Because we can look back and think, oh, I've never really 10x'd. But I'm going to give you some examples from my own experience that might allow you to view your own gains. So PJ and I did this exercise of looking back at our 10x jumps over the years. And I've been in business this year. It'll be 30 years. There you go. And so when we look back, and so I did this exercise with him in 2023, we look back over 29 years of business. And we had the starting point in 1994. Started the business in 1994. This was an events company. And for almost 3 years, we just did 2x, 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 getting a little bit better each year. And then in 1998, so 4 years later, we became the publishers of what went on to become the best-selling personal finance book in the world. And we had the rights here in Australia. We started to see a 10x jump in our lead generation, in our reach, in our number of inquiries. So we had this big jump in the publishing of that book. We had our first 5-figure one day in 1999. In 2002, hope you're tracking with me. So then we 2x, we did a 6,500 person event in Sydney. A couple of years after that, we did a $2 million event. Now, that's not incremental growth. That's massive growth. And so there's some changes we made, some big changes at those key times. But in the years in between, what were we doing? We were working on our systems. We were working on building a great team. We were figuring out how do we process bulk numbers of tickets. We were figuring out how do we publish a book and keep it in the bestseller list for 10 years. We figured out direct marketing and email marketing. And we saw this year-on-year growth. But every now and then we would strike on something that would see us take this big leap. And that was in the events business. But over in her business, which was then called the Australian Business Women's Network, we were seeing a similar pattern. We were 2xing for many, many years. Few more events, few more people at the events, few more members. Then we moved from offline to online. Big jump. Then we created the first ever online mentoring program. Big jump. Then we went totally offline, no live events, and started running webinars. Then we rebranded from the Australian Business Women's Network. Then we created high-end products. So we went from having, you could pay us $300 a year to being part of our mastermind, which is a $21,000, $22,000 investment, or attending our Reach retreat. So we totally changed the style of business, the products and services, the price points, the team, the reach that we had as a business time and time again. But we could only see that by looking backward and finding those milestones and those 10x jumps.
I absolutely love what you're saying there. I think you're doing such a good job of demonstrating that interplay between 10x and 2x, those periods where massive shifts happen. The volcano erupts. Things are different in a substantial way. A best-selling book and tens of thousands more people coming into your world and wanting to buy from you and wanting to learn from you, and going from small events to big events and small dollar products to big dollar products. And then the consolidation. Okay, we've made this giant leap. How do we consolidate? And if you miss that 2x period, like that's the really tricky part, that balancing act. Because if you're not sort of building those foundations under the big growth, it can be, difficult, exhausting, burnout, dangerous, cash flow can suffer.
Precarious.
Yeah, precarious. So you can mess up with your best clients. Like, that is why I'm so passionate about this idea of 10x and 2x kind of having this symbiosis, this relationship together. And I don't think 10x is easier than 2x, and I don't think 2x is easier than 10x. I'm not even sure that's the question. I think it's really about, hey, they're buddies, and it's the art form of how they interplay that really determines how successful and how far you take your business. And I see, Suzi, in each of those 10x leaps, amazing, by the way, and Suzi's only sharing the half of it with you. Over 30 years, this woman's made so many 10x leaps, like totally new ways of thinking in her industry, in her business, like so many things. But what I see is in each of those 10x leaps, you were prepared to embrace the new version of you, and the new version of your business and how things almost wanted to be. It was like they almost were sort of wanting to be that way, and you embraced it and you ran with it and you sort of picked your moments. You didn't stagnate. You kept growing and seeking and exploring what was possible and what you wanted to achieve. And it reminds me of this part in the book, 10X is easier than 2X, which again, I want to reiterate, I love the book, where they say most people are afraid to commit fully to the 10X process because it inevitably requires letting go of your current identity, circumstances, and comfort zone. Going 10X means you're living based on the most intrinsic and exciting future you can imagine.
I love that. That's such a quotable book. There's so
really.
many things I've
Read the whole book.
highlighted. Yeah. And so with what you're saying, I've experienced that. And maybe if you're listening, you can think of a time when that happened for you too. So a recent example that I shared with our masterminders is when we took the Her Business Live event online during the pandemic, I had to upskill myself. Suddenly where there was 3, 2, 1, lights, camera, action. We're in this virtual studio. There's people tuning in from all over the world, and so much is happening simultaneously. It's a one-day online event that we've run for the last 5 years. There's multiple speakers coming in, some in studio, some coming in online. I'm wearing an e-piece where I'm getting feedback from the crew. There are monitors showing all different things. There's a teleprompter. Now, I love it, and it gives me a rush, and it's an event that I love. But here's the thing, it was a 10X experience. Like, we have done Zoom webinars since 2006, but the moment we had to do a one-day event with all these moving parts, I had to 10X my skill level. The team had to 10X what it meant to deliver this sort of thing. So here's something that I keep asking myself. What do I want every year? What do I want my business to look like? What do I want to be doing in my business? And I know that I want more and more freedom. I know that I want more and more time. I know I want to make more and more of an impact. I want the business to remain profitable and not to go backwards. And the thing is that every time we make these 10X leaps, it's going to take courage. You know, you said something there, and thank you for your beautiful words, Michelle. It takes stepping into that void, not knowing if it's going to work. But once it lands and it's like, whew, okay, I made it to the other side. Now I'm going to stay here. I'm going to, make these tracks really, really deep and just stay here on this path, making it better and better until there's another opportunity to leap. So that's all I want to say about that.
Oh, beautiful. And, I think we're kind of at the point in the show where it's a question to ask our listener. What will you 10X? Maybe there's something on your mind right now. Maybe you're in the middle of 10Xing and you can so relate to what we're saying. Or maybe you're thinking, yeah, maybe I'm just like completely stuck in the plod. Maybe I'm just like totally in the weeds here and I'm not even 2Xing, I'm just Xing, So here are some clues as you start to turn your attention to what you might 10X. And with all the context that we've given you so far, that it's about making these big shifts and really going for what you want and kind of exploring what's possible. And then having those 2X kind of consolidations and foundations kind of building under that so you can grow again. So some clues around how and where and what you might 10X. Where right now is your audience saying, wow? It might be something small that you're doing. Like Suzi pioneered webinars in this country. She was one of a handful of people doing webinars. And yet it was a wow thing. People didn't quite understand it. I laugh when you say they rang you and said, where do they park? They didn't quite grasp what it was.
That happened for a long time.
But the idea they could be at home, like this is revolutionary. It's every day for all of us now, but it was revolutionary at the time. The idea I can turn up and see Suzi live and the great speakers that she had and the great information that she shared, the audience said, wow. This is incredible. And they kept turning up and they kept sharing it with others and they kept paying to be members. That's a clue. There's something in that. Maybe another clue is where you say, wow. There might just be something you do that you just love. It just lights your fire. And so often we will be prepared to push that to the side because we think, oh, well, that's not practical, or how does that relate to my business? But there are so many successful people who fuse together really kind of disparate interests and skill sets to create something entirely new that is a total 10x kind of business. So where do you say, wow, what's something that you could bring into your life? I had a speaker many years ago that I used to promote, and he was like a business guy, but he'd been in the music industry. And so, playing in the band for Mariah Carey and people like that. He basically used to go on stage and do music and play piano while he taught people business skills. And
That's cool.
it was cool. And it just attracted a 10x level of people because nobody else was doing that. What else are some clues? Where is the greatest block right now for you or for your customers? Where's some impenetrable problem they can't solve? What would it look like if you solved that problem? Where is your heart's desire? Where is your yearning? Maybe you want to spend far less time in your business. How do you systemize? How do you automate? How do you take that thing that you're doing every day in person and have it done by AI? How do you shift things dramatically? So where are those inklings? What might be speaking to you right now as you just quietly ask yourself that question? What will I 10x?
I absolutely love those questions. And I hope that you'll let us know your answers. And over on Facebook, if you look for Content Sales Podcast, you'll find our page. We'd love to know if you make a decision that you're going to 10x some of these things. We'd love to know. Tell us. But Michelle mentioned earlier that there's 3 ways that you can potentially find what you might 10x. And here's what those 3 areas are, and we're going to dive a little deeper into them. The first is doing something entirely new. The second is doing something you've already been doing, but changing it in a radical way. And the third thing is actually stopping doing something that you're doing. And we've got some thought starters for you in each of these 3 areas that we're going to run through with you now. So think of this as us gently grabbing you by the shoulders and giving you just a little shake, a little 10x shake. I can see it as a little dance. This is a little 10x shake dance. So maybe something's going to resonate, and I invite you to explore that. This could be your next area to 10x. And as I said, we'd love to hear if you choose some of these things. Michelle, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So Suzi mentioned those 3 things, and the first of those was doing something entirely new. So these are by no means this is not an exhaustive list, but again, it's just in the spirit of thought starters, in the spirit of that gentle 10x shake that Suzi was talking about. What might doing something entirely new do that gave you a volcanic upward trajectory towards your goals, towards your heart's desire, towards opportunity right now? So it might be an entirely new business, whether it's something that you do instead of what you're doing now, or whether it's something you add, like another business you add to your portfolio of businesses. It could be an entirely new product within your existing business. Maybe there is a gap right now that you see the opportunity for that is solving a problem that hasn't been solved before, or that's using your particular set of skills. Maybe it's an entirely new marketing channel, something you've personally never tried before. Maybe it's something that's out there in the world. Maybe it's even Facebook. Everybody's doing Facebook, but you're not. That could be a 10x thought for you, doing something entirely new. And we see this all the time in our mastermind group when people go into paid marketing and they start scaling up the front end of their business. Instead of putting 10 leads in a month, they're putting 1,000 leads in a month. Holy cow, does that 10x you pretty fast? It could be an entirely new way to make your offer. One of the things we teach people is how to make a good offer, because there's offers and then there's offers. Now, doing an offer badly, you can be speaking to 100 people and get bang, bang, no sales. Doing an irresistible offer very well, you could speak to those same 100 people and get 30, 40, 50 sales. So that's a way to 10x, by doing something entirely new. An entirely new pricing strategy, the way you might bundle things up together. You might go high ticket, like Suzi said before. You might slash your prices and go low ticket and go for volume. You might be shifting the way you work, going to having big chunks of time off, or an entirely new approach to how you take free time in your business, or shifting from custom to packaged, or acquiring another business and rolling it into yours, doing something entirely new.
I love that. And, at times we have done something entirely new, like totally change up our business model. But other times, and most of the time, I'd dare say we've done this second category, which is doing something you're already doing, but doing it differently. And so this could be an entirely different approach to either the way you deliver your product or service, or the way you produce or manufacture your product or service. It can be an entirely different approach to how you fund your advertising. It could be an entirely different way to target and recruit strategic alliances and access other people's audiences. It can be an entirely different way to staff your event. So for many, many years, we had a team, but when we started an office of our events business in the US, we would go into a brand new city where we knew nobody, and suddenly we'd have thousands of people in the audience. And so we started to get really good at recruiting and training volunteer staff to help us produce those events. And they got exchange. They got to meet the speaker. They got some private coaching. They got exchange for it, but it was a totally different way to staff the event. These days, a lot of events companies have their crew and, their volunteers, but that was something when we first started to do it. In fact, we did it, Michelle, for the very first Tony Robbins event here in Australia. The company that I was then a part of provided the crew because it was a way that we knew how to do that. A entirely different technology. When we first, did webinars, as Michelle mentioned, it was an entirely different technology. We had done events for a million years, but what we hadn't done is use technology in that way. It could be if you have a membership that instead of having it always open, you still have your membership, but you only open it twice a year. And so you do these big builds up and mega launches. That is doing something you're already doing, but doing it differently. That could be 10X. That was one of the things that we did. We were always open. So every single month it would be join our membership. And then we changed it to, well, you can only get in here and you can only get in here. And that allowed us to resource the company differently, to do our marketing differently, to put our attention inside the business and delivering our products and services. The ratio of doing that to actually outward promotion changed a lot. And that changed the stress levels within the business. Or it could be moving to personalization versus a one size fits all. So not changing what you're doing, but thinking about how could you do it differently. It's like going from having a printed newsletter to having a digital newsletter, or only working one-on-one to working one-on-many. That's a huge 10X move that we've helped so many women inside of our mastermind navigate and really thrive at.
My gosh, what a list. People have to hit the reverse 30 seconds button and go back and listen to that. I love that. Doing something you're already doing differently, I think, is one of the great unlocks for 10X. Doing something new is also amazing, but it can come with risk. It can maybe take a bit of time. You can, need a bit of time to skill up or, get things wrong, and we've got to do a lot of experimentation. But oftentimes just shifting what you're already doing in a really profound way is the fastest way to 10X. I agree with you. Now, the other way, there were three things Suzi said. So we've covered the first two. The first one being doing something entirely new. The second being doing something you're already doing radically differently. The third was to stop doing something you've already been doing. Maybe it's like a sacred cow. You never thought you would not do it, and now you're thinking about not doing it. And it's that idea of letting go of that old identity, that old way of being, those old ideas that perhaps aren't serving you anymore. So it might mean, how might that look? It might mean taking things out of what you deliver to your clients. And, Suzi, you've just done that. You've taken things out of what's inside the Her Business Network, streamlined it, tweaked a few of the things. And actually in that space, there seems to be this ability for the value to feel like it's even more, to flourish even more.
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive. One of the big changes we made this year with the Her Business Network is that we really, and we mentioned this earlier, identified our ideal client more specifically. And what we know is that women that we can help most, whether it's through our membership or our retreat or our mastermind, are women who are doing over $100,000 in revenue in their business. And they're actually fully boots and all into their business. And what we realize is that women who are growing a business at that level, they usually have very limited time. And so offering them 10 different things that they could do every month, we never did 10, but multiple things, wasn't necessarily beneficial for them. But if we could give them some fewer, more strategic, ways to interact with us and each other to help them actually set their plans for their finances, for their marketing, for their teams, for their leadership, for their personal development, and ways to connect with each other, they would make the time for that because it was important enough, because they were wearing the CEO hat multiple times a year and diving into training and support that was really suited to them at their growth level. What that meant, though, was there were lots of great events, which I still love, and a part of my heart's like, but you can only do what you can do. And the way that we're going to serve our clients best was to take out some of our deliverables and bring in just the things that we knew were going to get them the most results. And that's exactly what we've done. And we said it takes courage. 10Xing takes courage. It's taken courage for me and the team to say, not doing that anymore, only doing this, not serving this part of the population anymore, only serving this part. And so that is stop doing something. And what that stop doing is we're stop trying to be for all types of business women. We're specifically for women who want to grow.
And that's another thing you can stop doing, right? For anyone that's listening, you can stop targeting certain ideal clients that you've been targeting in the past that maybe, you're spending 80% of your time, but they're only representing 20% of your income. Imagine what a 10X move that is. If you stop serving them, now you've got 80% of your time back. Now, with that 80% of your time, if you double down on those other profitable customers, that is a very fast track to 10X your revenue. But here's what I've noticed. 10X has ripples because, and I've seen this with you, Suzi, like it's 10X experience of your members. It's 10Xing the results in terms of like you need fewer members to make just as much income. Yes. And I'm watching it 10X your freedom, which is the most exciting part, right? You're not doing a Facebook Live on 10 Facebook Lives a week and 35 roundtables and it's, you know what I mean? It's like, but it's better for everybody.
Yeah, it's better for the team. It's better for me. Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
There are ripple effects. You create the space when you stop doing something. And in that space, 10X can absolutely, that volcano can absolutely erupt. You might dramatically reduce the steps in a process, like simplify something right down. Maybe 30 people have touched it in your organization. How do you do that one person does it? Right. Maybe you're delegating some major activities to somebody else or another business even. And the big one is exploding mountains. Now, what does that mean? That means actually just stopping offering certain products. Like we talk about the marketing mountain being each kind of core thing that you sell is a mountain. The thing you sell is at the top of the mountain and who you need to buy it is at the bottom of the mountain, your ideal client. And your marketing process is the journey to get them from the bottom to the top. Now, that's a whole ton of effort, a whole ton of resources, a whole ton of focus. And we meet people all the time, Suzi and I, who have got 10 mountains, 20 mountains, or they've got 5 mountains right now and none of them are profitable. They're building a 6th mountain. And so we're really big on exploding mountains, getting rid of mountains. And we've just released an episode on this that's getting quite a lot of buzz already called When to Explode Your Mountain or Exploding Mountains, When to Stop Offering a Product, I think it's called. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes. And here's the thing, some of this, when you share it with your team or your business partner or yourself or your clients, you might get some pushback. People might think, well, be reasonable. And I tell you what, being reasonable is such a buzzkill for 10X. It is a way to surely not 10X. Most of the time, the 10X leaps that I've made, and I'm looking at those 10X leaps you've made, Suzi, there's a degree of being unreasonable, of making a stand for something, of not accepting the status quo, of having an unreasonable demand. No, I don't want this to take 30 hours. How do we do it in 2? And, we've been talking about Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach and the co-author of the 10X is Easier Than 2X book. So in 2015, talk about being unreasonable, he set a goal of writing 100 books in 100 quarters. That's one book every 90 days for 25 years. Now, I might sort of feel like, well, it would be reasonable to think he could write a couple of books. In 25 years, what would be reasonable? Maybe you could write a book every 3 years. Like, hey, that's like, 8 books and he's got another one on the way. No, 100 books. That's unreasonable. It causes a whole different layer of thinking, a whole different level of problem solving kicks in, a whole different paradigm kicks in. It's unreasonable. And here's the kicker. In 2015, when he set that unreasonable goal, he was 71 years old. And 25 years down the line, and how every 90 days he can publish another book. And you know what happened though? That unreasonable question, that unreasonable goal, that 10x thinking created 10x action. Now he has these models for creating books. He partners with other smart people. He sits with them, does a download in just a day. He can do a day every quarter. And then those smart people take these concepts that he's been building for decades and they unpack them and they turn them into books. That is an unreasonable question with a fantastic 10x kind of outcome. So the quality of our unreasonable questions, that is going to be a huge determinant of how often we 10x, how well we 10x. So just so we can model for you a few unreasonable, it might be, how might I charge $10,000 for a day? What would a CEO of a $2 million business do right now? You might be turning over 50,000, but what would a CEO of a $2 million business do right now? Like you've got some offer on the table from some client you don't want to work with, and you know they're going to be trouble, and you know your $50,000 self says, oh, well, I just have to take the money. But maybe you don't. What would a CEO of a $2 million business do? What does it look like to think like a $2 million CEO? Maybe you go and find another way to get that income rather than distorting yourself and your values or knowing that you're putting yourself on the line for a troublesome, bumpy journey. What would it look like if I spent half the time doing that? How might I grow my list from 5,000 people to 50,000 people in the next 3 months? How might I spend $10,000 acquiring leads in my next launch? If you've never spent any money on paid advertising, what might it look like if you went and spent some money on that? How might I have my own TV show? I mean, hey, Oprah had that thought at some point. That was more than a 10x thought. That was like a, what was that? Like a 70, 50,000 million.
I love those questions. I love those. I'm going to add a couple of my own. But I love them. I'm just excited about asking myself some of those, versions of those. So, we've seen a big, in the last 12 months, AI, changing a lot about what we do. But what if AI could do all of this, whatever this is that you're doing right now manually? What if AI could write your blog posts and your social media posts and your proposals, etc.? What if AI could do all this? Or what if I could deliver this service in a fully automated way from the moment the lead arrives to the way that the thing is delivered? Or how might I be the keynote at the #1 conference in my industry? That's an unreasonable question. If that's far away from where you are now, how can I travel in my van for 10 months of the year and still generate $1 million in revenue? Pretty unreasonable, but pretty cool. That's not one for me. I'm not interested in driving in my van for 10 months, but I might take
people who are
living overseas. Yeah. For someone else, that's the thing. So there are some ideas, thought starters. I'm sure it's given you some things to launch from. And these are ideas for how and why you might choose the 10x specific parts of your business and marketing, and how it fits with 2x. As we mentioned earlier, those times when you need to consolidate and make incremental changes. So I really encourage you to think about the 10x move you've already made. Think about the 10x changes that you want to make this year, knowing that if you've just been 2xing, that has gotten you possibly where you are now. Maybe it's time for some 10x thinking and some unreasonable thinking. And I know we read this out earlier, but it's such a good quote. I want to just come back to it. And this, once again, is from the book 10x is Easier Than 2x by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. 10x is the means and freedom is the end. Every time you go 10x, you consciously choose to live your life at a particular level or standard, no matter how abnormal or seemingly impossible, and I'm going to add, or unreasonable. You choose the standard, you commit to it, you live as you choose, transforming yourself and your world through your commitment. That's what we have for you on this idea of 10x and 2x. Is 10x easier than 2x? Is 2x easier than 10x? We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can reach us over at our Facebook page. And what I want to do is before we go, give a quick shout out. So it would have been, I think, unreasonable when we started this podcast for me to think, oh my gosh, we're going to have hundreds of 5-star reviews. We're going to have hundreds of ratings. We're going to have people writing to us every week saying how much they love the show. We could not have predicted that. We could not have predicted how like this was a 10x move creating this podcast. It didn't exist, and then it existed. It brings people into our world. It brings people into our mastermind. It allows us to bring wonderful, wonderful content, if I do say so myself, into the world. And we have so many people who appreciate that. And one of those people is Anna von Zinner. She's got a company called Book Me Now. She's one of our Her Business members. She's also a graduate of the Reach Retreat. And so she said that she went into the archive. So this is episode 227. She said, I went into the archive and started listening, and then I went down the wormhole. I'm about a dozen podcasts in just from the references you make in the podcasts, right? We mentioned other episodes. She said, I think I started in the middle. I had to go backwards to go forwards. However, I've loved the journey and have learned so much. Thank you to you and Michelle Falzon. My Her Business membership has paid me back so many times already. Well, Anna, thank you so much. We wish you a wonderful year. I know that you do an amazing job helping women to bring their book to life. We're going to put a link to Anna's details over in our show notes page. So we've created a page where we're going to put links to the things that we've referenced here. That's going to be over at herbusiness.com/10x2x. So 10x to the numeral X. So the numbers 1 and 0, the letter X, the number 2 and X. So 10x2x, right? Hopefully you got that. Michelle, anything you would like to say before we go today?
Well, Suzi, thanks for being a trailblazer of 10xing. I think for all women business owners who come into your sphere, I think it's an inspiration to see other women 10xing. So I just want to acknowledge you for that.
Thank you.
And I want to just suggest to our reader, go and get the book 10x is easier than 2x, especially with the frame that we've given you. I think it's a super helpful frame, even if we do say so ourselves. We're tooting our horn a bit today, which I'm all for. And a little tip, I have got the book and I've got the Kindle and I've got the audiobook. But the audiobook is great because Dr. Benjamin Harvey has written most of the book. Like we said, he's using all of Dan's lifetime principles. But in the audio version, there are these interviews, live interviews that Ben and Dan are having, these conversations. And I think you only get them on the audio. I haven't read
That's
them.
correct. Yeah, they're not in the book. They're only on the Audible. Yeah.
Yeah. And so highly, just another nice little ad. And there was so much gold in those conversations. I think some of my favorite parts were actually in those conversations. So check out the book. And big hat tip to Suzi Dafnis, Queen of the 10x.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much for listening. If you don't already subscribe to the show, just hit the follow button wherever you're listening. And we'll be back in just a couple of weeks with the next episode. Of course, if you've just joined us, this is your first listen, go back. There's lots of gold here on the show. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time right here on the Content Skills Podcast. Bye for now.